Let's add rebar to WF2 wall footing. Right-click on WF2, select Rebar, and then choose Add Rebar. This will open the rebar form. At the top of the form, you'll see the element name WF2, followed by details such as the class of concrete, PSI of concrete, and the elements X, Y, and Z dimensions. These dimensions are the same as those used in the takeoff form. Close the rebar form and return to the takeoff form for the WF2 linear element by clicking the three-dot menu on the left. In the takeoff, Y represents the width, Z represents the thickness, and X represents the length, which is calculated during the takeoff process. Reopen the rebar form for WF2 by right-clicking on it again. Since the takeoff for WF2 is complete, the X dimension is shown as 93 feet and 4 inches. It's important to understand that X is the length, Y is the width, and Z is the thickness for a linear element. Close the rebar form again and open Section 2's page to ensure everyone understands the X, Y, and Z dimensions. The footing is outlined with red lines in the section. The X dimension is 93 feet and 4 inches, representing the length of the section. The Y dimension is 6 feet and 10 inches, the width. The Z dimension is 1 foot and 1 inch, the thickness. Now, return to the rebar form again, and let's focus on the direction and range. By default, the rebar form opens with the rebar set to the X direction and the range set to the Y direction. Look at the picture on the right side of the form. It illustrates how the rebar will be placed when the direction is set to X and the range is set to Y. Again, direction is X and range is Y. Let's go back to Section 2's page again for further clarification. The X dimension represents the length of the element. When you set the direction to X in the rebar form, you are working with the continuous rebars that run along the length of the element. In this case, the continuous rebars are number 5 bars, placed on both the top and bottom of the footing. The range is Y, meaning the rebar will be placed side by side along the Y direction, out to out sideway, with spacing of 16 inches on center. For WF2 element, the X length is 93 feet and 4 inches, but it's not practical to place a single rebar that long. Instead, you'll need to decide on the stock length of the rebar to be delivered to the job site. Rebar is available in standard lengths of 20 feet, 30 feet, 40 feet, and 60 feet. Rebar cannot be placed tip to tip. For any bar exceeding the stock length, an overlap is required, as specified by ACI standards. The lap splice length and the total length of rebar will be automatically calculated by Haqq Takeoff. This process is quick and seamless. Now, let's return to the rebar form to continue. The direction is set to X, and the range is set to Y. Take a look at the lap splice value, which is 1 foot and 6 inches for size number 3 rebar. Let's change the rebar size to number 5. The lap splice value automatically updates to 2 feet and 6 inches. Next, look at the quantity, which is 7 for 12 inches given default spacing. Let's change the spacing to 16 inches on center. You'll notice the quantity adjusts to 6. Below that, the shape is selected as S, representing a straight bar. The green box shows 93 feet and 4 inches, which is the total length of the element. If, for some reason, you need shorter rebar, let's say 60 feet, you can adjust this value. However, for now, keep the default value of 93 feet and 4 inches, which covers the full length of the element. Now, look at the total length displayed on the right side, 100 feet and 10 inches. Why is this value larger than total length of element 93 feet and 4 inches? The stock length is set to 30 feet. So when 30-foot rebar pieces are placed along the 93 feet and 4 inches length, with 2 feet and 6 inches lap splices, the total length of the placed rebar becomes 100 feet and 10 inches. Next, observe the weight at the bottom left, which is 631 pounds for the rebar. Change the stock length to 60 feet, and note the difference. The total length decreases to 95 feet and 10 inches, and The total weight decreases to 599 pounds. This reduction occurs because longer stock bars require fewer lap splices. Now, switch the stock length to 20 feet. Using shorter bars increases the number of rebar pieces and lap splices. The total length increases to 105 feet and 10 inches, and the total weight increases to 662 pounds. This demonstrates how the stock length significantly impacts your estimation, so it's important to choose the right stock length for your project. For this example, let's set the stock length back to 30 feet, as it's a common stock length for continuous bars. Since continuous bars are placed top and bottom, enter 2 as the multiplier. The total weight now doubles to 1,262 pounds because they placed top and bottom. Add a note for yourself. Continuous top and bottom, then click Save. Now, navigate to the Rebar tab. Rebar tab is showing all the rebar in the job, and at the bottom right, you'll see that Haqq Takeoff has already separated total count of required stock length rebar. When working on the project, you can refer to this tab to get the exact amount of stock length rebar you need to order. Let's return to Section 2. The Y-direction rebar is specified as number 6 bars spaced 12 inches on center top and bottom, with the range set to X. Now, go back to the rebar form and add another rebar to the WF2 wall footing. Select Y as the direction. The range will automatically change to X. As shown in the diagram, we are adding shortway rebar in the Y direction across the full length of the element. Since the element length is 93 feet and 4 inches, rebar spaced at 12 inches on center requires 94 shortway bars. The quantity is already set to 94, as the default spacing in the rebar form is 12 inches. Next, change the rebar size to number 6. The Y dimension of the element is 6 feet and 10 inches, so the shortway rebar is automatically set width in the green box. Since rebar is required top and bottom, change the multiplier to 2 and add a note shortway top and bottom. Then, click Save and New. Now, let's add corner bars, which align with the continuous X direction bars. Select X as the direction and the range as Y. Change the spacing to 16 inches on center, and the quantity will adjust to 6. Change the size to number 5, as corner bars match the size of the X direction bars. From the Shape drop-down menu, use the shortcut key U to select Shape 17U. This shape has fields for dimensions A, B, and C. For corner bars, we only need 2 values. Press the shortcut key L to enter the lap splice value for each leg of the corner bar. Then press Tab and enter L again for the second leg. To count corner bars, click the Count tool icon next to the multiplier. Start clicking on the screen for each corner bar locations. For this example, we have 1 corner bar but top and bottom. Make 1 click for top and 1 for bottom. When you click, a round red mark appears on the screen to track the counted locations. Press Escape to finish counting. Add a note corner bars and click Save and New. Let's add Z-bars for the stepped footings. Although not shown in the details, adding Z-bars provides extra reinforcement to cover potential gaps. Z-bars run in the Z direction, with the range set to Y, just like the X direction bars. Use the same size and spacing as the continuous bars. Number 5 at 16 inches on center. Change the spacing to 16 inches, and the count will adjust to 6. Change the size of the rebar to number 5. From the Shape drop-down menu, use the shortcut key Z to select Shape 20Z. For the dimensions, enter L for the lap splice in the A and B fields. For the B dimension, add the Z value of the rebar. Since the step height doubles the WF2 footing thickness, enter 2 feet and 2 inches. Click the Count tool icon next to the multiplier and start clicking for each step. After clicking on all 6 steps for bottom bars, count the same steps again for top bars. Press Escape. The multiplier will update to 12, as Haqq Takeoff counted 12 steps. Add a note Z-bars and click Save. Right-click on the WF2 footing and select the Show Rebars option. This table displays all the rebars entered for the WF2 element. If you need to edit any rebar entry, click the edit icon on the right side of the corresponding rebar entry. After making your changes, click Save or Save and New. If you need to delete a rebar, click the red Remove button on the left side of the entry. Let's close the Edit menu. Additionally, on this rebar table, you can add more rebars by clicking the plus sign on the left, which will open the rebar form for a new entry. Return to the table, where you'll also see checkboxes for each rebar entry. By selecting these checkboxes, you can copy rebars to paste them into different details. We'll revisit this functionality in future tutorials. For now, you should be able to add rebar to linear elements. You're ready to move on to the next tutorial.